Good afternoon, everyone. May I have a mover and seconder to call the meeting to order, please? Councillors Fisher and Garwood, that the special meeting of the Council of the Township of Springwater of October 4th, 2023 come to order at 5 p.m. All those in favor? And that has carried. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? And seeing none, may I have a mover and seconder to approve the report regarding the new proposed corporate organizational structure? Councillors Thompson and Deputy Cabral, that the report from the Chief Administrative Officer regarding the new proposed corporate organizational structure dated October 4th, 2023 be received, and that Council authorize the Chief Administrative Officer to implement the new proposed corporate organizational structure and present as presented in Appendix A of this report effective January 1st, 2024. That Council authorized the CAO to immediately commence recruitment for the new Director of Public Works and Director of Parks and Recreation and Facilities, and that a bylaw authorizing the new proposed corporate organizational structure be presented at a future meeting of Council. And at this time, we can open it up to the floor. CEO Schmidt, if you wanted to begin.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, and good evening, Mayor Coughlin and members of Council. So this evening, we're here to discuss the option of a proposed new corporate organizational structure. So with that, some members of Council may recall, those that were on previous term of Council, we will recall that back in 2020, the Township undertook a service delivery review, and part of that service delivery review, there was 9 recommendations that were provided by the consultant at the time. And one of those recommendations was for the Township to consider restructuring the organization and essentially minimizing span of control. So in doing so, in September of 2019, we encountered some challenges with regards to vacancies. We had our Director of Rec who had retired, and shortly after that, we also had our Director of Public Works that retired. And so the thought at the time was to merge the 2 positions into a general manager position and to try to gain some efficiencies, and also to again merge the 2 portfolios into one. So Council was agreeable to that, and approximately about almost 2 years ago to the date, I was here speaking to Council about a new proposed corporate structure, which would have essentially what was proposed by the consultant, essentially 4 general managers, all responsible for different portfolios. One being corporate services, one being infrastructure and operational services, one being building planning and services, then the last one being fire and emergency services. Council was not amenable to that at the time. And so we've gone forward over the past 2 years, essentially with a general manager of infrastructure and operational services position, with the other 3 general managers yet to be approved by Council. Over the last 2 years, we've had the opportunity to see how the general manager structure was operating within the infrastructure and operations area, and unfortunately, I guess we've seen that some of the perceived benefits that were noted back when we first undertook this are not actually being realized. And so I'm here tonight with part of my team to ask Council to consider this new proposed structure, which essentially would go back to 6 directors, each being responsible for a certain portfolio, essentially eliminating or removing the general manager position of infrastructure and operational services, creating essentially 2 new positions, the Director of Rec, Parks and Facilities, as well as the Director of Public Works, which were in place previously. There is some cost implications in doing so. So again, I'm not being full disclosure with Council. In order to do so, there is potential cost implication of roughly $108,000 annualized. We can minimize that in 2024 with some savings that we were generated previously that we've not utilized, but ongoing it would be around $100,000, give or take $110,000. We do feel that moving back to this structure will assist the organization and will allow us to move forward with Council's initiatives. So I will pause there, Mayor Coughlin, and happy to answer any questions that Council may have.
Thank you, CEO Schmidt. Council, at this time, we can open it up to the floor for any further questions, comments. Deputy Cabral?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Thank you, CO Schmidt. Had an opportunity to think about this a little bit longer after it was first kind of brought up, and you know, we got the agenda. I guess the comments I want to make is with respect to the GM's position, because going back in time, there is a manager's position that didn't exist in the original structure, that being the fleet manager's position. That happened when we moved to the new structure with the GM. The other thing that comes to mind is that there have been a number of other significant changes operationally with respect to staffing levels, staffing mechanisms, however you want to say it, that this seems to have all come to a bit of a head. And I'm just concerned that maybe it wasn't just that organizational structure piece where one particular position didn't seem to provide the benefits. I'm wondering if maybe some of the other organizational changes that have been made over the last year or so might have played into it too. So those are some of my comments and some of the things that I've been thinking about. So it does give me a bit of pause on simply moving forward with a change in the organizational structure. I do realize that we're staff short. And I don't want to put any hindrance on that aspect of it. However, I'm just not sure. And I almost think back to the consultant and wonder whether or not it might be an idea to have them revisit it and give us their take on what this new proposal would do for us in conjunction with the changes that have been made for staff in the last year, both especially with respect to the remote working option too. I find it a little bit difficult to believe that one particular position has generated this much angst and basically dysfunctionality that we're not able to move forward. So those are just my comments, kind of put them out there so folks know at least where I'm kind of thinking and where I'm sitting on this. I don't know if I just want to jump with both feet back into it again. So I just like to hear from the rest of council.
Thank you. Councillor Alexander and Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. So a bit further to what the deputy mayor said, I'm certainly not against this proposal. I think we need to have at least a consistent structure. The hodgepodge of current GM and director, I think, is confusing. So I think we do need to make a decision to move forward. I don't necessarily want to rush into that decision. Also don't want to drag our heels on it either. As the deputy mayor said, there's an open position. I do think though, like when I'm looking at the report, and the idea was to move toward the general manager position, to be more collaborative and strategic. And now we're kind of saying the same thing, going back to the director. To me, that speaks more to corporate culture than organizational structure and title. So that's a bit of a concern, I think, that needs to be addressed. I don't think we're going to automatically get to cohesion and collaboration just by moving to a, directors straight across. I think we might have to dig a bit deeper and to look to the root cause of the problem. So again, those are just my comments, not against it, but also don't want to jump in just to go back to where we were.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Because I was part of the service delivery review committee that sort of generated a lot of this work and worked with a consultant, I think it would be beneficial to have all of council be in receipt of the service delivery review so we could see what the 9 recommendations were, because moving council to council, that information doesn't get translated and we're making decisions based on recommendations that were made that you're not even privy to or haven't accessed. So I think that needs to be reviewed and then we could maybe make a better informed decision.
Councillor Fisher and then Thompson.
I just feel that, bringing in the GM originally was to create efficiencies, and that's how it was sold. I wasn't on council at the time, but I do remember the service delivery review. Now I think we're being told that having a public works and a services director will bring in efficiencies, so it's sort of like going back to create efficiencies was something that was supposed to create efficiencies. seems strange to me. Also, I mean, I hope that this isn't just sort of a Band-Aid solution for losing the GM. And also, I'd like to know that, is this actually going to create efficiencies by having these two positions to replace the one? Are we just telling ourselves that? I want to know exactly why. And if efficiency is an issue right now with the organization, people getting things done, you know, I'll throw it out there. I probably won't be popular in saying this, but is something like the 4-day work week not what it's cracked up to be? You know, if we have an efficiency problem at Springwater, and we seem to have just said that, you know, maybe we need to dig a little bit deeper than just the organizational structure, as other councillors have just said.
CEO Schmidt, is there a comment on that, or I can go to Councillor Thompson and Garwood both have their hands up as well.
Thank you, Mayor Coggan. I think I'll wait for the other councillors and I can try to address most of the comments here.
Councillor Thompson?
Through the chair to CEO Schmidt. So this is, from what I'm hearing, this is being done to improve delivery of services. So if you could be specific to me as to how or what services it's going to improve, that would be great. From my perspective, there's been a significant amount of projects that were budgeted for this year that haven't been completed. Things like the library roof, things like the Grenfell Community Center. So if you could be specific how that's going to improve delivery of those projects being completed in a timely fashion, that would help me.
And I'll go to Councillor Garwood before CEO Schmidt.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, through yourself to CEO Schmidt. So two pieces, and I can wait for an answer. I know you have many questions that have been brought up by council. My first piece is looking at the financial implications of the proposed current structure. There's a 90,000 and change net savings from 2022. So I'm just wondering, where are those savings coming from? What account is that coming from? First question. And the secondary question is similar to what Councillor Thompson had noted. Again, I do have concern with there being both positions open, but especially the infrastructure side of the house, understanding that we all have large projects happening in our respective wards. I have one in mind right now that is quite taxing and quite heavy when it comes to resident questions and concerns. And I believe having someone at the helm that can dedicate their full-time hours towards a project like that is necessary. So again, I'm in agreement with the rest of council here. I definitely don't want to jump into something without having all of the information. I would appreciate the service delivery review information as well to be able to effectively make a decision, but I also don't want to see us wait 2 months to get there.
CEO Schmidt?
Okay, thank you, Mayor Coughlin. So a couple of things. So I guess there was one comment about, is this going to, we've made some changes over the last couple of years and with regards to the structure, and we've included some more management supervisory type staff. So keeping in mind that just recently, obviously in the last couple of years, we've gone through a collective agreement bargaining unit, which we didn't have before. And hence we didn't have bench strength in our management supervisory area in a lot of areas. And so especially the areas for our outside staff. So the idea is to build up a little bit our management supervisory team so that we actually had individuals that could actually supervise and manage some of these individuals in their positions. So that's the one point I would make. Some of the other comments here, I guess, about service delivery, obviously we can provide that to council. It's a public document, it's available, not a problem. The efficiency piece or the 4-day work week conversation, most of the individuals that work in this area within infrastructure and operational services actually don't participate in the 4-day work week. So there are other administrative staff that do participate. That's not to say that not all of them in infrastructure and operations. There are some, but the majority don't participate. And because of operational needs and the way the policy is written, it's really up to the manager or supervisor to determine whether or not the team or the individuals in the team can actually participate in the 4-day work week. If operational needs can't be met, then those individuals are not permitted to partake in the 4-day work week. So an example, we're coming up to winter operations. Essentially, the policy states that those individuals responsible for winter operations are not able to participate in the 4-day work week during winter operations. Conversely, when they're in the summer season, our roads and fleet staff have the ability to participate in the 4-day. Similar on our Parks and Rec, it's kind of the reverse. In the wintertime, essentially, those individuals can participate in the 4-day, assuming that operational needs can be met. In the summertime, with the peak season with sports and sports fields and such, they're not able to participate in the 4-day work week. So just some clarity there. Comments about, improving delivery of service. That is kind of what we're trying to talk about here, I guess, or trying to address. And the comment about some projects not actually being delivered. There's a couple of different things there, I think, that we have to take into consideration. The individual or the position that we had, didn't have all of the qualifications and their experience in the facility side of the business or recreation side of the business. And we knew that at the very beginning. And so, we've been working through that. But some of those projects on the facility side, and this conversation came up around the CAO table at my last Simcoe County meeting. What we're seeing is in the industry is that a lot of the roads projects are now the costing on a lot of road projects are starting to come back kind of pre-COVID numbers, if you will. Not quite there, but they're getting there. Facilities are like 2-3 times as expensive as what we had envisioned. And so what's happening is we're going out to bid and we're finding that we're way over budget on a lot of these projects, or the bids are coming in way over budget. And so we're trying to figure out a path forward as to how can we possibly change scope of some of these projects to reduce some of the scope to the extent that we can. That makes sense. And doing so, trying to also reduce the cost. Obviously, tonight you're seeing another report in the regular session whereby costs have increased for a facility due to other circumstances. But the reality is costs are increasing for facility type projects. I think having 2 directors, one focused on the infrastructure and roads area, infrastructure and asset management piece. Our manager of roads and fleet will concentrate on kind of more the resurfacing of roads, and our infrastructure area will look at more the urbanization, full reconstruction of roads. So the segregation between those 2 areas. And then on the opposite side, with regards to the director of rec and parks and facilities, as you know, we have the community hub that we're trying to push forward on, as well as the fire station, subject to council's decision tonight. We need somebody in that area that's strong in the facilities background that can actually help us push those projects forward, and also assist with some of those other outstanding projects that we have on the docket right now. So, the financial implication piece, Councillor Garwood, so the 90,000 and change is savings that were generated through the changes that were made in the last couple of years. Those dollars are sitting in a reserve that can be subject to council's approval, could be utilized to help offset some of the implication here. When we look at our roads and fleet area, if you will, versus our parks and rec and facilities area, in discussions with staff, I think we have a little more bench strength probably in our roads and fleet area. We do have a couple individuals that are, have either engineering background and or a CET background, so can help with delivering some of these projects. On our parks and rec side, we don't necessarily have the same level of bench strength. And so, if council is not agreeable or not amenable to going forward with both directors at this time, understood. But I think staff's thinking that we would likely probably go out with a director of rec and parks and facilities at this stage, just due to the fact that we have some of these larger projects on the docket and we don't necessarily have the same level of bench strength with the team.
Yeah, I do have Councillor Fisher and then Deputy Cabral.
I think a major concern I have aside from this, but it plays into it. Now, there are a lot of major projects like the hub. I think it's been 3, if not 4 months since we saw that presentation. And I think we gave them a pretty clear directive to come back with something, in a timely fashion. It's yet to come back. I'll say this, at this rate of speed, some of us may not be on council, so this is something I personally, and I think I speak for a few other councillors here, we'd like to see something come forward. And in my opinion, it should have been back before us by now. Like, we gave them a pretty clear directive as to what we were looking for, or scenarios, I'll speak to the Grenfell situation. That's a number of years, right? That's been sitting there. I forgot about it, but the roof from the last budget, you're right. It's a $25,000 fix, right? That we allotted for. You are right. Inflation is affecting these things. So, here we are going into another budget, and I'm seeing things that we approved last year that are relatively simple. I mean, doing that roof, that's relatively simple, not coming back to us. And then there's other, major infrastructure projects too. So my question is this, or my worry, I guess, is this. By going back to 2 positions, are we going to improve this? Are we going to see these projects get done, or at least come back to council? Or are we just adding 2 positions? My apprehension is that we're about to spend more money and be at the same level of efficiency. And maybe next year I'll see a presentation on the hub, and we can be that much further away from building it. So I will say this, I'm willing to listen to it, but I have some real apprehension in that, I think the last term of council, they were told there would be efficiency with the GM position. And I can tell you there's projects that precede my term on council. So, what's the problem? I can also tell you this, and then I'll, even over at the pavilion in Midhurst, it's relatively new as compared to other pieces of infrastructure, but it's starting to need maintenance done to it. I don't see it happening, right? So I agree, there's not much bench strength there, but is this plan going to give it? Or are we just giving up more money to be in the same situation? So I need reassurance for that. So.
CEO Schmidt.
Thank you, Mayor Coggins, through you to Councillor Fisher. So Councillor Fisher, on the community hub, I can tell you I'm meeting with a consultant tomorrow with a game plan of trying to get in front of council as soon as we can here. So they have provided some updates based on the direction that council has provided. And so hoping to have that in front of council very shortly here. So again, as you stated, there are some of those projects that, the Grenfell one specifically, as well as the Midhurst Library, the roof. Those are 2 specific projects that staff did go out. And unfortunately, bids were much higher than budget. And I think the one project in Midhurst specifically, I think the challenge is not just simply removing shingles. There's a little more structural damage that's there that we're trying to address through this procurement process. So again, similar to infrastructure projects, you have some infrastructure projects whereby you do all the planning that you can and all that you think you need. You open up the ground, the next thing you know, you encounter something that you didn't think you're going to, right? There's always those. I'm not saying every project happens that way, but there are some of those cases too where that does happen. That's the reality of it. Sometimes we have good information, sometimes we don't have good information as to what's underground, right? So.
Deputy Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Just a couple of comments. Some of the things that CO Schmidt touched upon. I think it's important for us to realize that I think a lot of the issues that we're thinking about up here right now are major projects that were approved that never moved forward. It's not the rank and file out on the street, driving the truck, maintaining the roads, or cutting the grass, or looking after the arena that is responsible for putting that stuff out there. So yes, they don't participate in the 4-day work week, but the staff that normally would be tasked with that, I don't believe they are union staff. They may participate in the 4-day work week, but I think what it is that it seems that one man apparently was holding this up. And that's pretty tough to believe, because it's not our staff that are going to be doing the work. It's whoever it is that we hire to do the work that is going to be doing the work. So it's not additional work for our own staff They have their regular duties that they tend to throughout the year. Ditching, snow plowing, cutting the grass, maintaining the fields, maintaining our buildings. And in the summertime, they're grading, they're ditching, they're doing all that kind of stuff where they're needed. These are operational matters that we do all the time. What we're falling behind in and what is costing us a lot more money now is the fact that the major projects aren't coming back to us and people aren't getting hired. And when we talk about the fire department, I don't think that's, and no offense to you, CO Schmidt, but I don't think that's a good example, because we actually did award that. Things fell apart, but we actually did award that. That's not a reflection on staff, because staff did move forward with that particular project. Of course, it's a project that we prioritized. But I think it's important for us to understand that what's going on isn't necessarily our staff out in the operational field. It's whatever's going on in here in putting these tenders out and getting them back before council so we can approve them, award them, and get these projects going. And money keeps coming back out. The other thing is, when it talked about bids, the roof, for instance, the bids were coming in a lot higher. I think this is the kind of thing that council needs to know about, especially if it's a situation where council's not going to be approving that particular bid. At least if we know that that's what's going on, we can then turn around and say, hey, if that's what the trend is, and you do need more funding for a particular item that you thought was going to cost maybe $40,000, now it's 55. That might be something that would be in the realm of being approved at the management level, which I think it is. If it's under 50,000, then maybe that's the kind of thing that needs to be brought to council's attention so that we can work with staff and make it happen, as opposed to too high, too high, too high. I don't think it's going to go down any lower if we keep waiting. So I'm just trying to say that I don't think it's our operations. I think what's falling down is our ability to actually get these RFPs out there, get them back, bring them before council, and have them awarded. I'm not 100% certain, but I think the number of projects that are being carried over right now, I think it's in excess of $1 million, but you're more than welcome to correct me on that. And, I can think back to my first term back in 2019 when we were talking about the tennis court in Elmvale. And, every year I keep asking, is that money still there? It's not going to be enough to do much, but at least it's a pocket full of cash to be put towards a tennis court whenever we eventually get to the point where we could do that. So, and I don't know if changing the structure like this is going to correct that, because don't have the GM, and now we're moving to a director of Parks and Rec and a director of Public Works. Theoretically, I almost feel like we had those two people in Scott Howe and Brianna Dean being managers assisting our GM. So it's just a little bit tough if we're going to go down the road to make sure it's the right road this time for us to take, so that when we move forward, things are happening. And if somebody is not, pulling their weight, we need to find out why. What's going on that's causing this backlog? It's not like Service Delivery Review identified a number of areas where we were short on staff and staff was overtaxed. That was corrected. Every position, with the exception of one, was allocated the last couple of years. So if there's an issue, we need to dive deep and find out what's going on that's causing this issue so that we can get out of it and start getting these projects on board. So they're really just comments. Other than the $1 million one, I think it was more than $1 million. I just would like to know.
Think anything else? I don't know if Director Radigan wanted to speak to the procurement process, and if we go out with if council has approved something at 35,000 and it comes back at 45, what is the process that follows that?
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin, through you to members of council and Deputy Mayor Cabral. The process based on our procurement policy currently is, if we have a project budget of, for example, $35,000, and the project that was approved through council, through the budget process, if it comes in under the 35,000, staff have the authority to approve it. Anything that's over budget must come back to council for final approval. And obviously anything over 75,000 has to come back to council for final approval as well. So staff do not have the authority to approve anything that is over budget. Thank you.
And is there comment on the outstanding value of jobs? Sorry, I just know that deputy, yeah, or we can get that sent back to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Based on the 2023 approved budget, there was about 10 million of 2022 projects that were carried forward, and 2023 another 10 million that was approved. So for a total capital budget of about 20 million.
Thank you. Councillor Alexander?
So just a suggestion. If we do move towards this director level, and to me, we should be having, like, these are upper management positions. There should be some sort of SLA in place of how long before a certain type of project comes back to council. So whether it's coming back to council to say, we can't do it, we're nowhere near, we didn't put enough money aside, then we know, or yep, we're ready to go, or you know what, I'm behind in the game because of XYZ, I don't have the answer for you yet. Then at least we're aware of what's going on. Like, we know that you're having the conversation with the hub consultant firms, as opposed to like just waiting and not knowing what's going on. If there could be any type of SLAs tied to these, it would then, in my mind, be tied to pay increase, bonuses, any of that structure, which we don't need to go down that road right now. But that means they're doing their job and how they're supposed to be doing their job, and we are kept informed and can make decisions. So that's just a suggestion.
I have Councillor Moore and then Fisher.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. And just, I should ask CAO Schmidt, I didn't plan to address the Grenfell Hall situation tonight. But it was recommended that we talk about it during the capital project report. So I'll just hold off until then. But I do want to say one thing that Deputy Mayor Cabral brought up, and that is the delay in projects being awarded or approved by council. And then in my particular situation, I was advised how much money to ask for also by staff. But then by the time I get that approved, it gets approved. And then here we are a year and a half later, or a year and months later, it's over budget. And of course it's over budget. I mean, it's not shocking to anybody. But then we have to come back to council and ask for more funds, because I don't want to scale back the scope of the project at all. In fact, it's going to need more work the longer we wait. And we know that because we have the consultant's report. So I think, well, there is a sense of urgency in my mind, but the ball is falling short somewhere. And I won't address that in regular council, but I will have to publicly at least talk about the hall, because I get asked all the time. And I think I've been talking about this for 5 years, and my predecessor before that. So it's just embarrassing at this point. So, but I will wait to say my other stuff later. Okay.
CEO Schmidt and then Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Just some comments around the, I guess, the delay in some of the projects. So again, you know, I think what council maybe doesn't fully appreciate is that a lot of these major projects were falling to this one individual for approval. Ultimately, everybody was kind of funneling to this individual to try to move projects forward. And that was a bottleneck. And there was lack of communication that was happening amongst the group and outside of that group, if you will, amongst the rest of the senior management team. So that was one of the reasons why having 2 new positions, if you will, hopefully will alleviate some of that bottleneck. And so you have an individual that has experience in parks, facilities, and recreation that can focus on driving those initiatives and driving those projects forward, similar on the public works side. Whereas in the current structure that we have today, we're seeing a huge bottleneck. There's a lot of projects that aren't moving forward because the individual is trying to address each one of those and just doesn't have the capacity to do so. That's the big concern right now, is just a huge bottleneck right there.
Councillor Fisher.
So two things. The reason I'm asking these questions, I think we all are, is just really want to know before we go forward is going back to the GM position versus the two position. Will it achieve that efficiency? You're saying it is, I'm asking these questions. But when it comes to, and I think Councillor Moore touched on it, when it comes to the budget, when we see 25,000 for a roof, 75,000 for this, that's staff's recommendation. They're bringing it to us. They've done condition reports on buildings, like they're bringing it to us, right? And yes, there will be some inflation, but you're saying, I'll pick an example with the roof on the Midhurst Library. Did they not know there was structural issues before? Right. I would expect that the condition report, and I've read a few of these condition reports, everything from the Elmvale arena to both of the libraries. Right. We rely on this information. So we're hoping it's accurate, also too, if we then say, for example, with the library, if say midsummer or in the 6 months after a budget, we find out there's structural issues, we wait until the next budget, and then it goes 6 months after that, you're 18 months later. I'm assuming the structural issues probably in this case come from water damage. I'm just assuming because it's a roof. So that's only getting worse for 18 months. And then whatever we approve this time will be basically null and void by the time we approve it 2 years from now, right? So it doesn't make much sense, right? It's like a leak in my roof at home. It's the same principle. So I agree with what the deputy mayor said. These need to come back to us. If it is $10,000 more, so be it. But it's going to be 20, 25, 30, $100,000 more if we keep kicking it to the next budget. So I think one way to improve efficiency without positions aside, right? I think staff needs to be able to bring stuff to us in a timely fashion and say, look, council, it was 10K more. These are the bids. Let's get on it. I don't think any of us would be opposed to that. What I'd be opposed to is spending 100 grand next time to fix the same problem that was 25 2 budgets ago. Right. So I think if we're looking for efficiency, there's some efficiency right there and some cost savings to the taxpayer without hiring somebody, That's my 2 cents worth.
Before I do go to Deputy Cabral, I completely agree. And I like this conversation that we're having. I think that we've identified, but I do agree that it is a bottleneck, and having worked with both structures, I prefer the GM or not the director structure, having 2 separate entities that are accountable. And there was synergies between the two groups. At one time, we were even sharing staff back and forth for that reason. I think that as we move forward, the more we delay this decision, and it's a huge decision, it really is, but these projects aren't going to move forward, and we do have to choose whether it's, back to the way it is currently or back to having 2 positions. And I am also of the mindset that by hiring one of those 2 positions today, we're essentially committing to hiring 2 of those positions, and we're simply maybe looking for a couple months of cost savings. But if we have a couple months of cost savings, I agree that those roofs aren't getting done, those projects aren't getting done. So I don't think we may be saving money on a budget, on a title, but I would like to get this going. I fully support having the 2 positions and moving back to where there's accountability, and hopefully, like you said, I see them almost as 2 different structures, in that if this council is very interested in having a report that comes back to us, and this is where the tenders are at, this is where I would like that communication to know, because I don't want to see anything fall through the cracks, because we're the ones who are answering to our residents saying, why isn't this job done? You're like, well, I approved it. I don't know why it's not done. That's our job, is to approve it. Anything after that really isn't. So I would like to see those reports to continue, because I don't want every year on our term to have $10 million of work not getting done, because that just balloons into something that is going to be really hard for our taxpayers to swallow. So I'm going to go to Deputy Cabral.
Yeah, actually, this will probably be my final comments with respect to this. But when you talk about accountability, it's easy to say that the people down here are the ones that need to be accountable. But when it comes to GM Ramdale, I'm going to put it out there. C.O. Schmidt had an obligation to make these projects move forward too. And it did catch us off guard. And we, had discussion about it. However, having said that, it doesn't negate that we're in a difficult situation now. I don't really see why projects that have already been put out for RFP or tender aren't going to still proceed, whether we have someone in place or not, because CEO Schmidt managed the portfolio before, and I'm quite confident that he can manage it again in the short term. My real concern, and I think everyone knows, I was not a fan of the GM position to start. But I also have to now look at our current structure and ask myself, is it the position that was lacking, or was it something to do with the mechanics of the individual that was in that position that things started to become a bottleneck? So that's my question. My question is the GM structure the right way to go with the right person in there? So that would be it. But also, the other side of the coin is, the director of Parks and Rec would be nice to have one, because that's something that we could move forward with. But it's just, we're between a rock and a hard place once again. And that's what I mean. My question is the GM structure, I wasn't in favor of it, but I need to also consider whether or not it was workable and it fell apart for the wrong reasons, and whether or not going back to the original structure is where we should be headed. And I'll be honest with you, I prefer the original structure, but I do want to put it out there that maybe it's not the GM position itself that, held things back.
Councillor Garwood and then Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. And just my final comments, and I'm also going to direct a question to CEO Schmidt. The deputy mayor mentioned accountability, and I completely agree with him in this aspect. I definitely had concerns, and I've had for some time, with the overall accountability in regards to some of these projects and the response time for our residents. I also think I'm in favor of whatever structure is better for our residents. And I know that's obvious for me to say that, but I say that in the sense of, right now, if 7 members of council are inundating one staff member or multiple staff members because we're not getting information communicated to us, that just, again, plugs up the structure that exists, regardless if it's 5 positions or 4 positions or 6 positions, whatever it is. I also think communication. I think about the fact that there's been multiple projects this term. I can't speak to previous terms, but that members of council, the mayor and the deputy mayor, haven't been made aware of until they're actually starting. Yes, we approved them, but that could have been a year ago. Again, information that we should have in our inboxes, so when residents come to us, we have an answer for them, A, and B, we're not using staff time to go and ask for this information. So personally, again, I wasn't a part of the decision to go to the general manager structure. I'm in favor of the proposed structure that CEO Schmidt has laid out this evening. Personally, if we are only moving forward with one in the interim, or maybe we aren't, again, I would like to see the director of public works move forward and not the director of recreation, parks and facilities in the interim. If we were to only approve one, that's my personal opinion. But my question to CEO Schmidt is, understanding that we hired a consultant in 2021, spent X on that, don't know what it is, I'm not asking for that specific information, but to then be told to go to the GM route, we went that direction. Now we're coming back and saying we're going backwards. So the money that we spent on the consultant, in theory, was that a good use of money spent? I can't say for sure. But at the end of the day, do you feel now, going through the past 2 years, and not to put you on the spot here, CEO Schmidt, do you feel that it was, maybe the word mistake is not an appropriate word to use, but a misstep to go in that direction, go down the consultant route, hire the GM? Or do you think, again, it was a learning opportunity for us to grow forward in the future, and this director of public works and director of parks, recreation and facilities is the best route forward? Obviously, I know you think it is because you're proposing it, but just want to know your opinion.
CEO Schmidt.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. Through you to Councillor Gerwood. So Councillor Gerwood, great question and comments. I think those that know me, I think I'm willing to take a chance, and maybe this was one of those chances we took. And we, sometimes you have to put your head on the line sometimes to try new things. And this is what we did. And to be honest with you, sometimes things on paper look really good. No different than recruitment. Sometimes things look good on paper. And then when you actually go to deliver, they don't always come to reality, if you will. And so I think that's kind of why we're here. I'm taking full accountability to the organization. I'm here. I'm trying to propose a new structure because I think it's in the best interest of the community and the township moving forward. Did I make a mistake? I took a chance. It didn't work out. And I'm going to continue to take chances, though. That's part of the job. That's part of learning. That's part of growing. And it's part of me making sure that my staff also continue to take opportunities and chances, right? That's part of what we do. So am I wrong? Is it a mistake? Maybe it's a misstep. And I'm here to take full accountability for that. But to answer your question, I'm here tonight seeking council's direction to move forward to help this organization, to help this community move forward, because I believe this is what's really needed to do so.
Thank you, CEO Schmidt. Councillor Fisher.
I think if we're to move forward with the two positions, I agree with what the mayor had said before. Let's not delay it. Let's do it right and just hire both at the same time. If we move in that direction, I feel that it's sort of delaying the inevitable. We might as well just do it right from the get-go. So, if the CAO believes the two positions, I've listened. I wasn't on the previous council, if Jeff, you feel that the two positions will improve efficiency, then, I'm willing to vote in that way. However, I'll say this, and, not to put you on the spot, but you're absolutely right. Sometimes with staff, and you do gamble a little bit with structures. I mean, that has to be accepted sometimes, quite honestly. So I wouldn't call it a mistake. I think a misstep is probably the right terminology for it. But that being said, in 6 months, when we still feel like there's inefficiency, it does rest on you, as you know, because if we aren't seeing the hub come forward, if we aren't seeing discussions about Craig Road or any of these smaller projects get done, then I think it's well within I think it's actually our duty to come forward and say, wait a second, we hired these two people. It was supposed to create efficiencies. I didn't expect it in 30 days, but we're at 6 months and what's going on. So I don't think there's any harm in experimenting with different structures. What I don't want to see is in 6 months having a conversation where it's like, I can't get a fence painted, like what's going on here and why is this in front of council again? So I think in terms of hiring and filling out the structure, we really should be looking at efficiencies, right? Because at the end of the day, it costs the taxpayer money. Salary aside, right? It's unfinished projects, as in your own words, they keep mounting in price. So I think that, if we're going to move in that direction, either you go for the GM, hire him, get going on it, or go for the two and move in that direction, but expedite the process, create efficiency, and let's reevaluate it. I think it's our job to reevaluate it as well and to say, is this working?
Deputy Cabral.
Thank you, Mayor Coughlin. I mean, we're sitting around here listening, and we're between a rock and a hard place. Been here before, where we felt like we're under the gun. And with all due respect to a lot of the comments that have been made, I mean, it does boil down to taxpayer dollars. I certainly would prefer to see one position move forward rather than the other. But if we do that, we're negating the GM position. And that seems to be the consensus around the table. And I was not a huge fan of the GM position initially. However, I also have to be mindful of the fact that it's taxpayer dollars. And also that I really struggle with the idea of, going down the road and then when it doesn't work out, telling people it was nice to have you and now we don't want you. So I'm open, but I would certainly, because I know from CEO Schmidt, he's looking for Parks and Rec, and Councillor Garwood is suggesting public works, because we have a lot of public works things and it's the lion's share of actual projects that need to be tendered out and need to, get people coming back so they can be awarded. I don't know how much of that is happening on the Parks and Rec side. So I would actually propose, like, if we're going to move forward, then let's move forward tonight too. And I would propose that we hire both.
Thank you very much, Councilor. Councilor Thompson?
I would agree with that. I don't see any benefit in deferring the decision. I think good leadership, you make your decision and you move ahead. And I could support that.
Council, we do have the resolution before us as it is, and moved and seconded by Thompson and Cabral. And if we're both comfortable with that, if there's any amendments, Council, to what's before us this evening,
Could you put it up on the screen?
I can reread it for you.
Can you?
I sure can. Yeah, we can read it together.
No.
So the motion before us is that the report from the CAO regarding the new proposed corporate organizational structure dated October 4th, 2023 be received, and that council authorize the CAO to implement the new proposed corporate structure as presented in Appendix A of this report effective January 1, 2024. That council authorize the chief administrative officer to immediately commence recruitment for the new directors of public work and director of recreation, parks and facility, and that a bylaw authorizing the new proposed corporate organizational structure be presented at a future meeting of council. Is there any further comment or questions on that? I guess just for myself, it does say that commence immediately of the hiring, and that the effective January 1st, 2024. So I'm just curious if we're able to recruit those positions prior to, that's where the 90,000 would help offset, or what's the plan there?
Through you, Mayor Coughlin, the idea would be is if council is agreeable to the motion tonight, we would commence recruitment immediately. And any other changes that are being proposed in the structure would be effective January 1st, 2024.
Sorry.
All right, council, seeing no other questions or comments, all those in favor? And that has carried. Thank you. Council, may I have a mover and seconder for the confirmation bylaw? Councilors Moore and Fisher, that bylaw 2023-024, or sorry, 92. I got that wrong. To confirm and adopt the proceedings of council at the special meeting held on October 4th, 2023, listed herein, be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk. All those in favor? That has carried. And a mover and seconder for adjournment. Councilors Alexander and Garwood, that the special meeting of the township now does of the Corporation of Springwater does now adjourn at 5:52 p.m. to read again in regular session on October 4th, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. All those in favor? And that has carried. Thank you.